Hi, this is Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. These are the stories on my mind in the world of boxing this October 9th, 2012. This weekend, the play we recommended, plus 180 underdog Ivan Calderon, did not deliver. But gamblers should still have been taken care of, as the hedge we recommended of Moises Fuentes by KO held. Fuentes got the 5th round KO. Now, Calderon won the first 3 rounds. But going forward, you need to be careful because he now lacks the punch resistance. Fuentes was particularly effective with body punches. In the 4th round, he was able to get inside, hit Calderon to the body. That theme carried over to the 5th round. This was very reminiscent of Calderon's losses to Giovanni Segura. No dispute on the stoppage. Calderon, in fact, took a knee. He clearly is at the stage in his career where aggressive fighters know if they can get to his body, they can get to him. So Ivan Calderon did not deliver, but the hedge did. Let's move along. Here's a story I think you should keep an eye on. Celestino Caballero, rather than fight his mandatory, Jamaican Nicholas Walters, who's unbeaten with an 80% KO ratio, has decided to vacate his title. Now, this story deserves a look for a host of reasons going forward. Caballero was to get $90,000. Now, keep in mind, if you believe that you're light years better than your opponent and that the fight would just be a glorified sparring session, this is literally passing on $90,000 for a glorified sparring session. Not only that, in the world of boxing, titles are where the money is. You don't want to give up a title, especially when you don't have another one, right? Because titles are worth money. So what that tells me is that this is significant. It means to me, and perhaps I'm being unfair here, but let's just say it. It means to me that Caballero thinks he can lose. Now let me just say this. Walters has big money behind him. Interestingly enough, his promoter is junior middleweight champion Saul Canelo Alvarez. Let me also say that boxing is rock, paper, scissors. Caballero is a tall man at 5'11", who's able to operate behind a jab, right? Now, understand that in the world of boxing, the rock, paper, scissors world, height is not always an asset. In fact, it can be a liability. A fighter who can duck under the jab and who can get inside and throw hooks to the body is exactly the kind of fighter who would give Caballero all kinds of trouble. Now, there's not a lot of film on Nicholas Walters, but I have film on my channel page of Walters training. And what you'll see in that film is that Walters looks like he can fight low, and it looks like he throws a very good left hook. Walters might be exactly the kind of fighter who could give Caballero, who is now 36 years old, all kinds of problems. Let's go further. Even though Walters is Jamaican, in full disclosure, I'm Jamaican. Even though Walters is Jamaican, Walters has spent extensive time training in Panama. In fact, Panama is where most of Walters' fights have taken place. Well, let's just say that Celestino Caballero is Panamanian. Walters shouldn't be a mystery to him because Walters is one of the up-and-coming fighters training in Caballero's country, right? Walters has had several big fights in Panamania at the Roberto Duran Stadium. And so my point to you is simply, keep an eye on Nicholas Walters. The fact that Celestino Caballero is willing to give up a title rather than fight him reminds me of Riddick Bowe giving up a title rather than fight Lennox Lewis. Right? The future indeed might be very bright for Nicholas Walters, who has an 80% knockout ratio. Let's shift gears to another fight. And this is one that, quite frankly, I think is too dangerous to bet on. It's Abner Maris versus Anselmo Camito Moreno. And if you don't know, Camito, translated into English, means chemist. Right? Moreno is a technician. What I mean by that is he's in there with a refined technique that he uses to offset his opponent's strengths. Right? Now, Moreno lacks experience at 122 pounds, which is where this fight is going to be fought. But understand that even though Moreno, with little experience at 122 and with a knockout ratio of less than 40%, even though Moreno is in uncharted waters for him, in my opinion, since technicians rely on angles and technique more than brute force, right? The weights don't matter as much for technicians as they would for tough guys who are really relying on strength and punching power, right? Now let me say this. This is why I think this fight is too scary to bet on. I'll pick a winner, but it's too scary to bet on. One of the ways to beat a technician, and that's what Moreno is with volume. Technicians often have lower volume because they're there setting up and waiting for openings. Not only that, whereas a non-technician starts the fight and he can just come in, seek and destroy. A technician starts a fight where he's actually looking at your patterns, right? A technician is a pattern recognition expert. He's looking at your patterns, trying to figure out what you're doing, making a mental note of your punches and your tendencies, trying to figure out where he can be, where your chief weapon gets neutralized, right? And so what this does in the early rounds, right? Technicians tend to be counterpunchers. What this does in the early rounds is this gives a high volume guy an opportunity to fill in the gaps with punches, right? To literally give the technician too much to counter, right? You'll notice counterpunchers start slow. Here are examples, right? Floyd Mayweather against Zab Judah, right? Sergio Mora in both fights against Brian Vera, right? Who beat him in both fights, right? Adrian Broner in the early rounds against Daniel Ponce de Leon in Broner's closest fight to date. De Leon actually threw more punches in that fight than Adrian Broner, right? In other words, the early rounds are rounds where these technical guys are vulnerable. Well, let me just say this. Maris, compared to Moreno, is much higher volume. That's his calling card. Let me just throw out some numbers. Understand, in the 4 fights before Maris fought Eric Morale, Maris was averaging 79.1 punches per round. Right? In the Morrell fight, while Morrell got off 565 punches, Maris threw 780 punches. Right? 215 more punches than Eric Morrell. Now let me tell you about the brilliance of Camito Moreno, who I'm picking to win this fight. Right? Maris is going to come in. Maris is going to throw big volume. Maris has a great left hook. Right? He dropped Joseph Agbeko with it early in their first fight. He has a great left hook. He's an excellent body puncher. Let's talk about Moreno for a moment. Moreno fought Vic Darchinyan. Now, Vic Darchinyan recently beat Luis Del Valle. Right? Darchinyan still has gas left in the tank. Now, would it surprise you to know that Vic Darchinyan actually threw more punches than Camito Moreno in the fight? Right? Moreno threw 498 punches. Notice the gap between himself and Maris, who threw 780 punches against Eric Morrell. Camito against Darchinyan throws 498 punches. Darchinyan throws 555 punches. Now, would you believe that even though Moreno threw more than 50 fewer punches than Vic Darchinyan, a world-class fighter, did you know that Moreno actually landed 115 more punches than Vic Darchinyan? That's a textbook technician. Lower volume, much higher percentage rate. They read and recognize your pattern, then they start landing clean punches every time there is an opening. Against Vic Darchinyan, a guy with a huge punch, Camito Moreno landed 66% of his power shots. 66%. In fact, against Darchinyan, Moreno landed 43% of his punches. I think Moreno wins this fight. I'm not recommending a bet on the fight. I'm just telling you who I think's going to win as a boxing fan. I think Moreno wins this fight because, in my opinion, Maris looked average in that first Joseph Agbeko fight. Right? He's a good body puncher. It's almost impossible to hit Camito Moreno in the body. You're talking about a guy who, quite frankly, is one of the best defensive fighters in the entire sport. I've had Moreno for several months on my top pound-for-pound list at Dwyer top10boxing.blogspot.com. You take away the low blows from Abner Maris, and I think Maris is in trouble. Let's remember, too, even though Moreno doesn't have any experience at 122, understand that Maris barely has experience at 122. It's a bit questionable how that Maris-Morrell fight was a title fight at 122. Let me also say, too, that Maris can be hit with jabs. Joseph Agbeko hit him with 73 jabs in the rematch. Rematch numbers are always more interesting than original numbers because that's when the fighters are acclimated to each other and know what to expect. Well, even knowing that the jab was coming, Maris got hit with 73 jabs in that rematch. Moreno has an excellent jab. He's going to bend at the waist, making it very hard to hit his body. I think when you throw in the movement and when you throw in the openings, that, will happen due to Abner Maris's high volume. I think Moreno beats Maris. Now here's the risk, and it's huge. I'm just going to be as blunt as possible. This is why the fight's really unbettable. Abner Maris is very popular in Southern California. This fight is taking place at Staples Center. Also, if the judges, get caught up in volume as opposed to technical brilliance, right? If the judges don't value defense, and if they're just going for the more active fighter, understand that Maris is almost certainly going to be the fighter throwing more punches. Keep in mind, Victor Chinian threw more punches than did Camito Moreno. Let me just tell you, too, about Moreno's technical brilliance. In the De La Mora fight, and understand, this is a fight that made it into the 8th round, right, against a guy De La Mora, who was high volume, right? Understand that at the end of the fight, which ended in the 8th round, De La Mora had landed 47 punches on Camito Moreno. 47 over 8 rounds, right? That, if you're doing the math, that's less than 6 punches a round, right? And just like in the Victor Chinian fight, in terms of power shots, Moreno in that fight landed 59% of his power shots. Quite frankly, I admit I'm biased. When I see a great technician with great defense, whether it's a Floyd Mayweather, whether it's an Adrian Broner, or whether it's a Camito Moreno, I'm impressed. Okay? I'm much more impressed by Moreno than I am Abner Maris. I'm picking him in the fight. I'm just not betting on the fight because I think it's too risky given the fact that Maris is more popular. Maris is going to be favored. Maris is going to be fighting in Southern California. But whoever wins this fight, I want you to look at what Moreno does. He is a chemist in the ring. He is special, in my opinion. He is a different level than the champ. So if you're watching the fight, even if Moreno gets robbed, don't focus too much on the commentary. Lord knows if this is an HBO fight, HBO loves hometown favored fighters, right? Don't listen too much to the commentary. Just look at the fight and ask yourself a couple of questions. Can Maris, who landed several low blows against Joseph Agbeko and who is a body puncher, can Maris hit Moreno to the body? Right? And secondly, who's more efficient? Who's landing the higher percentage of their punches? Right? I'll throw in a third. If you see Moreno able to land his jab with regularity while Maris can't land any body shots and can't quite line up the angles, can't back Moreno into a corner and succeed with Moreno in the corner. And keep in mind, Moreno's one of these fighters who, even when he's up on the ropes, he's dangerous. Right? If you're asking yourself those questions, and all of the answers are coming back Camito Moreno, being successful, doing what he wants, then he's the one who should, quite frankly, get the decision, whether or not the judges give it to him. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for watching.